All right, y'all. So now we're going to do the highly anticipated hero tier list. This is going to be the thing that gets me in hot water the most. I guarantee it. This is going to be the thing that pisses. Somebody is going to get pissed off. I'm going to upset somebody about their waifu. I'm sorry in advance, but it's got to happen. All right, we got to talk about it. So we're just going to make this down, dirty, and quick. We're going to talk about each of the heroes. We're going to talk about their pluses, their minuses, the pros and cons, I guess is probably a better way to talk about that, and where I would rate them on a scale from S to D with a little bit of a spicy one at the top. We'll get to that one. So, but yeah, so let's go through it all, and we try to be as objective as possible. Remember, this is early access, so these heroes have a lot of chance to change. They have changed a lot already. Some of them have gotten better, some of them have been nerfed, and they're going to continue that way. This is also assuming that these are fully upgraded heroes, so the altar is fully upgraded, and this is them without paths, right? So I'm just going to talk about the base hero as they are. We've already done the hero path list, so you can check that one out if you'd like to. And if you like this kind of content, do consider subscribing to the channel. It definitely really helps. I love making content like this, and I want to make more of it, so subscribe. All right, so let's get into it. We're going to start over here on the right with our newest hero, the Runaway. This is a hero that's gone through a lot of changes. When she was first in the game, she was really bad. I never played her, honestly. I think a lot of people tried to play her and just couldn't figure out her kit. I think she suffers from just being there's just a lot of places that she doesn't work really well, and she isn't the best damage dealer. She isn't the best dot dealer. We're talking about without paths here, but she is very versatile. She can play frontline, she can play backline, she can heal, and she has some of the best utility abilities in the game. Like upgraded smokescreen is incredible. She has self-heal. She can heal people who are bleeding at any level of health, which is the only heal in the game that outside of combat items can heal people like up to full health. Like she can heal people if they even only have like 2 health down, as long as they're bleeding, and bleed is very common in the game. So I would say she's a lot of fun to play. She's very versatile. I think she takes a little bit more nuance than some of the other characters do. Like some of her abilities, like Firestarter and like Backdraft especially, are very niche, and they require either a very specific team or just kind of building a whole build. Like Backdraft especially almost requires that you build an entire team around Backdraft to make it work, which is, I don't think, the best way to play an ability, but hey, you know, it can be a lot of fun. So I would say she's mid-tier. I think she's fun to play. I think you can play her in most team comps and find a way to make her work, but I think that she lacks in like being a star at anything in particular, besides the fact that she's the only hero that can burn like effectively. So yeah, so I'd say she's B tier. She's a lot of fun, but yeah, she's definitely not the worst. She's definitely not the best. So now we're gonna move on to the Plague Doctor, and I think everybody here will agree with me in saying that the Plague Doctor is S tier, right? She is versatile. She can deal a lot of damage, whether that's through constant damage from her dots, which she can apply to front and back row, or heavy damage with Incision. Like Incision is actually pretty good for just raw damage plus a bleed. Not to mention the fact that she is by far the most reliable stress healer in the game. Not stress healer, healer, not stress healer. She's by far the most reliable healer in the game. She used to be the most reliable stress healer in the game. She's definitely been nerfed. Like she used to be a god amongst mortals for sure, back when ounce of prevention was the only reliable way to heal stress, but now she just works, right? I would say the only thing she suffers from is positioning, right? She has to be used in the back lines to really make best use of her. If you end up with a Breacher Plague Doctor, you're kind of SOL, but I would say she's probably the most used hero, the one that people will almost always take. If especially newer like people are always going to take her. People who want to play it safe, they're going to take her. I don't have many, like my most successful runs almost always have her on the team. She's just consistently good at healing. She's got enough damage. She's got some very good utility, like she can give positive tokens, she can daze, she can stun, she can blind, which is very effective as well. So I would definitely say she is an S tier hero for sure. So if anybody disagrees with me there, I don't know what game you're playing, because she's S tier easily. All right, moving on. Let's go to our good old friend Al, the Occultist. This one is going to be controversial, I think. I think the Occultist is a very fun hero to play. I definitely think he's one of the harder heroes to play, and the fact that he has some more nuanced abilities. I think his base kit is very like versatile. Like if we're talking like Abyssal Artillery, Demon's Pull, his cursing abilities are actually fairly useful. Like his ability to weaken and vulnerable can be very, very useful. Obviously, he's the secondary healer. He's kind of the only other primary healer in the group. Obviously, the Runaway has a heal, but it's dot dependent. His is only health dependent, which makes it kind of more usable, but he still suffers from the curse of the 0 heal bleed, which is never fun to get, so he can kill people pretty often. What his pros are, though, for sure, is that he's versatile in where he can be positioned. Frontline Occultist is not a bad thing. Like, same as in Darkest Dungeon 1. Frontline Occultist is definitely very fun and playable. He can do a lot of damage with his stabbing abilities, but I think that his mechanic of the unchecked power, I think it's very hard to set up. Like, obviously you can just do Chaotic Offering, but Chaotic Offering is, well, it's chaotic to say the least. I mean, the shuffles, the potential stuns and dazes, whatever the case is, it's a rough play, and by the time you set it up, most enemies are probably dead or close to dead, and you're gonna not really get much out of it. Other things like Malediction and Amnesis, those two abilities are supposed to be really strong, but they suffer from just taking too much time to set up and not putting out enough damage. Like, an Amnesis doesn't work unless you're working on an aspirant, right? And I think that abilities should be good without having to have a path to make them good. Like, they should be balanced as like okay abilities, and for the effort you have to put in to make an Amnesis work without aspirant, and even with aspirant, it's really not that great. Magnesium Rain doesn't require any setup and can hit all 4 enemies, and while it doesn't do upfront physical damage, it's still going to burn every single one of them most likely. So and then Malediction is just, it's supposed to be this boss ending move, but the fact that it can actually be resisted, and then you've spent all this time setting up an ability, getting the unchecked power, whether that's using combos and the sacrificial stab or binding shadows, whatever the case is, and then you get all this setup, and then what? You don't get it to stick, and then you've just wasted 2 unchecked power tokens where you could have done flying or burning meatball attack or the falling star attack. I think he suffers from a lot of that, so I think he's fun. I think the issue that I have with him is that his more like fun abilities and like out there like really cool attacks and stuff require a lot of setup for not too much payback. Like Falling Stars is good, but it's kind of boring. I wish that Malediction and Anamnesis had more versatility and were easier to use or had better use. So I'm probably going to get some shtick for this one, but I think he's going to go in C tier, y'all. Like, I think he's really good, but not the best, for sure. Okay, now we're going to move on to another one of my favorites, though, and that's Barristan, the good old man, the man-at-arms himself, an absolute just beefy guy. Probably up there with the Plague Doctor as far as just being one of the best utility heroes in the game. He's the most reliable tank. He has very consistent damage. He has good stun potential. And his downsides are few and far between, right? His biggest downside is probably his speed. So if you're trying to set up like taunts and stuff, he ends up going at the end of the first round usually. So you kind of have to like eat some of the damage initially. So unless you have a way for him to generate taunt early on, it can be a bit of a problem. He also does suffer from not being the most damaging hero, but his base damage isn't that great, but his self-sustain is incredible with Crush. His stun and daze opportunities of Rampart are really powerful. His more advanced abilities, particularly Courageous Abandon, feel a little bit like a miss. They don't really work that well. I don't think they do, at least. I also don't think he's that great as a support character. They've definitely built him so that he could be like a backline support character with like command and bolster and defender and things like that. So you can put him in the back and he can still tank and he can still kind of like, you know, help with other heroes, but it feels a little bit weak. But I still would say his overall utility is great. He's the second best stress healer in the game. In fact, his stress heal is actually very reliable. So I would actually say it's almost on par with the Jester in that sense. So I think he's S tier, man. I think you can pretty much play him in any run and he'll do good. Like you can't really go wrong with him. So next we're gonna move on to the Leper. So the Leper is a controversial hero, has always been a controversial hero in the Darkest Dungeon community. Some people love him, some people hate him. I think he's really fun to play, but I think the biggest thing that he suffers from is, of course, his blind. And the biggest thing I think about the Leper is that you kind of have to build a team around him. You can't really have, like, your team has to synergize very well with him, and if they don't, he suffers greatly from it, right? When he's almost easier, in my opinion, to play as a tank, because then you don't need to really worry about the blind as much. You can just use like Intimidate and just, you know, withstand and just take damage as much as you can, and you don't really have to worry about hitting things then, and just hit things when you can and like whatever. But if you're really trying to deal him as a damage dealer, you need to work for that pretty hard, and have synergies, whether that's command from the mana arms or combo generation with the Jester, or whatever the case is. And if you don't have those things, you don't have good combo generation, you don't have a way to remove blind reliably, he can really suffer and become a bit more of a burden to a team than anything else. I think he's a really strong hero, quite literally, but I think his setup requirements are pretty strong. I also think that there's a good amount of his kit that isn't super useful. Like, there's a few abilities that I just like Ruin is really good. Revenge is good, but they both require a fair amount of setup and a kind of a specific build. And again, I think a lot of those things, because of the setup time required for them, it's almost like you could just have gone for the raw damage off the gate and probably killed things quickly. He's very good at taking down bosses with those setups and things. But so I would say he's A class. I think he just requires a lot of setup. But he is fun to play, and when you get him working right, he works well with a lot of teams. Again, the other thing he really suffers from is his positioning, right? He only works in positions 1 and 2, nothing in position 3, nothing in position 4. So, you know, it is what it is. But yeah. All right, so next we have the Jester, who is, again, one of the heroes that almost probably everybody plays pretty often, right? Because of the fact that he is, bar none, the I would say the best stress healer, or at least the easiest stress healer. I think a lot of people, I would say that Barristan is honestly on par with him as far as stress potential. I mean, the difference is once they're upgraded, the only biggest difference is obviously the 1 stress pip difference, but I think the Jester's real leverage is just being able to clear off horror, which can quickly get away from you if you're dealing with like multiple cherubs or you're dealing with a ghoul or whatever the case is. So I think his kit is fun. I think he has a lot of utility, like his dancing, like when you get him dancing back and forth, he's doing Fade to Black and he's doing Razor's Wit, and then you know, if you can get like solo finale going, it's a lot of fun. He does suffer from being very squishy, and I think there's almost too many ways to play him. I think he has like he has a very varied, like, is he a support character? Is he a damage dealer? Is he a stress healer? There's like a lot of different things that he does, and I think that can kind of muddy him up a little bit. But he's a lot of fun, and I think he's just a very good utility character. I would say that the biggest thing in his ability and his kit that feels lackluster is actually Finale. I think Finale just doesn't feel as like heavy as it did in the first game. It does a lot of damage, but for the amount of setup and the requirements for, like, if you really want it to hit hard, you have to have the combo token and stuff. And I don't know. I think he has good survivability. Obviously, he doesn't have any self-healing, which can be a bit of a problem, but his bleeds are really fun and can get really heavy really fast. But again, I think he suffers from Finale not being that great. But I would say overall he's an A-class hero. I think you can play him, or you can pretty much play him in any team and he'd be good. But I think he just feels a little underwhelming to me right now. I think he could definitely be a bit more he should be like the most fun character to play, and I think sometimes he doesn't feel that way, though Intermezzo does help with that. But I'm not rating these based off of their paths right now, so I think Intermezzo does make him very, very fun. Next we have the Highwayman, and I'm going to say it right now, the Highwayman is a god amongst mortals, right? He is the easiest character to play for good reason, and that's just that he can deal consistent damage from any position with the right setup. And I think that just makes him the jack of all trades, very, very good character. I think that he is, he's just very, very good. And there's nothing really I can't think really what his negatives are. I guess his biggest negative is probably no self-heal. And I would say tracking shot feels pretty lackluster. But almost everything else in his kit has like a time and a place that work really well. I think Highway Robbery is very creative. I think his movesets when he's in the front, he's using like, point blank shot, his duelist advance, I think pistol shot, double tap, like all of those abilities feel really, really good. Like double cross has a lot of utility. And I think that, again, I think he's the easiest hero to play. I think every new person who picks up Darkest Dungeon 1 just understands his kit without having to think too much, and he's just simple. He just gets the job done, and it's really, really good. So yeah, I would say he's definitely a god amongst mortals. All right, getting them back onto the ladies here, the Hellion. I think the Hellion is, so I'll start this off by saying the Hellion is my favorite character design by far. I think she's the coolest looking of all the heroes. Especially with that bone spine piece she's got going on now. Like, goddamn, that shit's cool. I will say I think her kit suffers a lot from just having multiple moves that don't get used, like Yawp, however you pronounce that. Breakthrough is notorious for being just a terrible ability. I think her bleed skills suffer a lot from the fact that they're both so positionally dependent. If it bleeds, you can only use from position 1. It can only hit position 1. No, sorry. Bleed out. That's the position 1. And if it bleeds, can only be done from position 2 and 3. So you can't, like, if you want to play her as like a bleed hero, you almost can't, because she can only do, you have to basically use 50% of her bleed skills. You can only use 1 in one position and 1 in the other position. And you're almost always playing the Hellion in position 1. So many of her, like, helpful things are based off of her being in position 1. She has one trinket that helps her in position 2, but you're very rarely going to be staying in that position, especially because you're probably going to be generating winded at some point, and the easiest way to get rid of winded is going to be toe-to-toe. That actually has some value. So I think her kit just suffers a lot. I think she if you play her like base, I almost think her Wanderer class is like, or just being a Wanderer is actually the best way to play her, because she just can be up front. She just deals raw damage. You can Howling End, toe to toe, and then just do Wicked Slice or Wicked Hack for a little bit, and just kind of do that. It feels kind of boring. It feels kind of lackluster, but she does do a lot of damage. She does work with a good amount of teams. I think she also is another hero that does require a team that works well around her. She can't just like fit into any team. She has to be on the right team, and that's not terribly bad thing, but I do think she suffers from that. I think she can be very reliant on her paths, which isn't a great thing. So I'm going to say she's down here with this one's going to make people mad. Somebody's going to come at me and be like, she's my wife, man. You can't say that. Don't worry. I'm about to piss you off even more, though, because we're going to get to the Grave Robber here in a second. And as the Grave Robber stands in the game currently, she is not a good hero, in my opinion. I think she suffers from very low damage. I think she has a very high dependability on stealth, which has gotten better with the stacking stealth that they've added into the game. It's definitely much more reliable. It's definitely easier to work with. But I think she requires a lot of setup for not that much reward. She has the increased crit chances, So if you can get the combos going, she can kind of guarantee crits, or at least coin flip crits, which is better than like 20%. She can get to like 50, 60. I've definitely seen people get like 80, 90% crit chance of her, which is good for stress healing and for just dealing raw damage. But I still think that her kit is just, it feels very weak. She's very, very squishy. And I think you have to work really hard to make her fit into a team. She has to be able to either dance correctly or, yeah. So this one's gonna piss some people off. I don't think she's very good right now. I want her to be better. I really want to have no characters in that D list or even that C list. But I think that right now, Audrey is suffering from just having the worst kit in the game. So I'm sorry, Shuffle, but she's D tier. I don't know what to tell you, man. Sorry. So Shuffle's community, don't come after me. This is I'm gonna go to Shuffle's stream and get banned when this video comes out. So, but on that note, we come to the Bounty Hunter, who is a hero that maybe some people don't consider a hero. He is definitely a special case, and I think it's pretty obvious to say that he is a god amongst mortals. He starts off with really powerful abilities. He has stuns that work off the bat, don't need setup. He has abilities that work from any position. He can be put into any position. He has movement abilities. He has stun, daze, combo generation, vulnerable generation. He can tank, he can taunt, he can guard. He's just very, very strong. And that's, again, just part of him being a specialized hero. So I don't think he really counts, right? He's just stronger than the other heroes. He's just better. He's just built different, okay? And that's just the way he is. So I don't think anybody's going to disagree with me there. Obviously, there's some other controversy of the Bounty Hunter, but he's definitely up there. So, yeah, I would say this is a pretty good rating of the heroes as they are now. I think some things like the Runaway being above like Occultist and Hellion is going to get me some shtick. I think the Runaway's kit just works very well. I think these two need some help. I think Audrey needs a lot of help. I think everybody else is feeling pretty strong, right? I think my S classes are mostly just heroes that work in almost any team. I think my A classes are just very strong heroes that work in most teams but require a little bit of setup. And then from there, it's just more about people that don't work great in every situation, but they have some fun, but they need some help. And yeah, I think overall, this is a pretty good list, but definitely let me know what you think. I'm sure I'm going to get some comments that tell me what you think very vividly. So, let me know. That's totally fine. And if you like this kind of content, do consider subscribing to the channel. It super duper helps out. Leave a like, leave a comment. I would appreciate it. And if you want to see more tier lists like this, I have another one on Hero Pass, and I have another one on every trinket in the game right now. So definitely go check out those other tier lists. And yeah, thanks for watching the video, and I'll catch you all in the next one.